Marlboro Country's lawyers, how big tobacco fought science for decades. In the gleaming boardrooms of Park Avenue and the tobacco fields of Virginia, one of the most cynical corporate conspiracies in American history was taking shape. For over 5 decades, ALTRIA Group, the parent company of Philip Morris and maker of Marlboro cigarettes, orchestrated a systematic campaign of deception that would make them billions while killing millions. This wasn't just about selling cigarettes. This was about selling doubt itself, manufacturing scientific confusion, and turning America's legal system into a weapon against public health. Between 1950 and 2006, Big Tobacco didn't just fight regulations or taxes. They fought reality, spending an estimated $20 billion to suppress, distort, and discredit scientific research that proved their products were lethal. This is the story of how lawyers became the foot soldiers in tobacco's war against truth, and how one company's legal strategy became a blueprint for corporate denial that continues to this day. The conspiracy began in earnest on December 15, 1953, when the presidents of America's largest tobacco companies gathered at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. The meeting was arranged by John Hill of the public relations firm Hill & Knowlton, and the agenda was clear. Scientific studies were beginning to link cigarettes to cancer, and something had to be done. What emerged from that meeting wasn't a plan to make cigarettes safer or to warn consumers about health risks. Instead, it was a sophisticated strategy to manufacture doubt about the scientific evidence itself. Within weeks, they published a full-page advertisement in 436 newspapers across America titled "A Frank Statement to Cigarette Smokers." The ad claimed that tobacco companies were committed to learning the truth about smoking and health. But between the lines was a more sinister message. The science linking cigarettes to cancer was uncertain, disputed, and far from conclusive. This wasn't just spin. It was the birth of a multi-billion-dollar campaign to weaponize uncertainty. At the heart of this strategy was the creation of the Tobacco Industry Research Committee, later renamed the Council for Tobacco Research. On paper, it looked like a legitimate scientific organization dedicated to funding independent research into smoking and health. In reality, it was a public relations front designed to create the illusion of scientific controversy where none existed. The committee was controlled by tobacco industry lawyers, not scientists, and its primary function was to fund research that would muddy the waters around tobacco's health effects. Between 1954 and 1998, the CTR distributed over $300 million in research grants, but internal documents later revealed that lawyers had veto power over which studies got funded and which results could be published. They funded research into air pollution, genetics, stress, and dozens of other potential causes of cancer, anything that might shift blame away from cigarettes. When studies threatened to confirm tobacco's dangers, the funding dried up. Scientists who produced inconvenient results found themselves blacklisted, their careers destroyed by an industry that had masqueraded as their patron. The legal architecture of this conspiracy was built on a foundation of attorney-client privilege and carefully crafted corporate structures designed to shield damaging information from public view. Altria and other tobacco companies routed their most sensitive communications through their law firms, claiming that business decisions were actually legal advice protected by privilege. They created shell companies and research organizations that could conduct studies and issue statements while maintaining plausible deniability for the parent corporations. The law firm of Shook, Hardy, and Bacon became particularly notorious for its role in this scheme, representing tobacco companies for decades while simultaneously positioning itself as an independent voice, questioning the science on smoking and health. Internal documents later revealed that lawyers weren't just defending tobacco companies after the fact. They were active participants in designing the conspiracy, advising companies on how to fund research that would support their position, how to attack studies that didn't, and how to maintain the appearance of scientific uncertainty, even as the evidence against tobacco became overwhelming. By the 1960s, as the scientific evidence linking cigarettes to cancer became impossible to ignore, Altria and its competitors doubled down on their strategy of denial and delay. In 1964, when Surgeon General Luther Terry released his landmark report declaring that smoking caused lung cancer, the tobacco industry's response was swift and coordinated. They didn't dispute the report directly. Instead, they questioned its methodology, its conclusions, and the competence of the scientists who wrote it. Altria spent millions funding alternative research designed to contradict the Surgeon General's findings, while their lawyers crafted statements that seemed to acknowledge health concerns while actually admitting nothing. The company's position became a masterclass in legal doublespeak. They couldn't say smoking was safe because that would expose them to liability, but they couldn't admit it was dangerous either. Instead, they claimed the health effects of smoking remained an open question, requiring further study, a position they would maintain for another 4 decades, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. The 1970s and 1980s saw the conspiracy reach new levels of sophistication as internal research conducted by tobacco companies themselves began confirming what outside scientists had been saying for years. In 1969, Philip Morris scientist William Ferrone wrote an internal memo stating that, "We are in the business of selling nicotine, an addictive drug." Company researchers identified specific compounds in cigarette smoke that caused cancer, developed techniques to measure addiction potential, and even experimented with ways to make cigarettes less harmful. But none of this research was shared with the public or with government regulators. Instead, it was buried in company files, hidden behind claims of attorney-client privilege, or simply destroyed. Meanwhile, the company's public positions remained unchanged. They continued to claim that the health effects of smoking were uncertain and that nicotine was not addictive. Altria's lawyers played a crucial role in maintaining this facade, advising scientists on what they could and couldn't say in public, reviewing research proposals to ensure they wouldn't produce damaging results, and crafting public statements that seemed responsive to health concerns while revealing nothing about what the company actually knew. The human cost of this conspiracy was staggering and continues to mount today. During the decades when Altria and other tobacco companies were fighting the science linking cigarettes to cancer, American smoking rates remained artificially high, sustained by an industry campaign that convinced millions of people that the health risks were uncertain and debatable. The Federal Trade Commission estimated that tobacco industry deception delayed widespread public acceptance of smoking's dangers by at least 20 years, during which time millions of Americans started smoking, who might otherwise have avoided cigarettes entirely. The death toll from this delay is almost impossible to calculate, but public health experts estimate that tobacco industry deception contributed to hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths. Beyond the mortality statistics were the human stories. Families torn apart by preventable illness, healthcare systems overwhelmed by smoking-related diseases, and entire communities devastated by an epidemic that industry executives knew was caused by their products but chose to deny and downplay for decades. The conspiracy began to unravel in the 1990s as a combination of whistleblowers, investigative journalists, and aggressive attorneys general forced the disclosure of thousands of internal tobacco industry documents. These papers revealed the full scope of the industry's deception campaign and exposed the central role that lawyers had played in designing and maintaining it. Perhaps the most damaging revelation was that tobacco companies had known about the addictive properties of nicotine and the carcinogenic effects of smoking for decades, while publicly denying both. Internal memos showed company executives joking about their customers' addiction, discussing strategies to market to children, and celebrating the success of campaigns designed to reassure smokers about health risks the companies knew were real and serious. The documents also revealed the extent to which lawyers had controlled the industry's research agenda, using attorney-client privilege as a shield to hide damaging studies and prevent scientists from publishing results that could harm the company's legal position. What emerged was a picture of an industry that had subordinated public health to profit and had used the legal system itself as a weapon in that campaign. In 1998, facing an avalanche of lawsuits and the prospect that even more damaging documents might be revealed, the major tobacco companies agreed to the Master Settlement Agreement, the largest civil settlement in American history. Under the agreement, Altria and other tobacco companies agreed to pay $246 billion to state governments over 25 years, impose restrictions on their marketing practices, and fund anti-smoking campaigns and research. But perhaps most importantly, they were forced to disclose millions of pages of internal documents that revealed the full scope of their conspiracy against public health. The settlement was widely seen as a victory for public health advocates, but it came with a crucial limitation. It didn't require the companies to admit wrongdoing or accept legal liability for the harm their products had caused. Even in defeat, tobacco industry lawyers managed to craft an agreement that allowed their clients to avoid criminal prosecution and continue selling cigarettes while paying what amounted to a cost of doing business. The tobacco conspiracy didn't end with the master settlement agreement. In 2006, federal judge Gladys Kessler issued a 1,653-page ruling in United States v. Philip Morris, finding that Altria and other tobacco companies had violated federal racketeering laws by conspiring to deceive the public about the health risks of smoking. Judge Kessler's decision provided the most comprehensive judicial account of the tobacco industry's conspiracy, documenting decades of coordinated deception and finding that the companies had marketed and sold their lethal products with zeal, with deception, with a single-minded focus on their financial success, and without regard for the human tragedy or social costs that success exacted. The judge found that lawyers had been central to this conspiracy, helping design strategies to hide damaging research, coaching scientists on what they could say in public, and using legal privilege to shield the industry's most damaging secrets from public view. But even this sweeping legal victory had limited practical impact. The judge was prohibited from imposing financial penalties under the relevant statute, and the tobacco companies continued to sell cigarettes while appealing aspects of her ruling. The legacy of tobacco's legal conspiracy extends far beyond cigarettes and continues to influence corporate behavior across industries today. The strategies pioneered by Altria and other tobacco companies, manufacturing uncertainty about scientific consensus, funding research designed to muddy clear conclusions, and using legal privilege to hide damaging information, have been adopted by companies in the oil, chemical, pharmaceutical, and food industries. Climate change denial, opposition to chemical regulations, and campaigns against sugar taxes all bear the fingerprints of tactics first perfected in tobacco industry boardrooms and law offices. The conspiracy also revealed how America's legal system can be manipulated by wealthy corporations willing to spend billions to avoid responsibility for the harm their products cause. Attorney-client privilege, designed to protect legitimate legal communications, became a tool for hiding evidence of corporate wrongdoing. Scientific research meant to expand human knowledge was corrupted by industry funding designed to produce predetermined conclusions. And the adversarial legal system, based on the idea that truth emerges from vigorous advocacy on both sides, proved vulnerable to manipulation by corporations with unlimited resources and no commitment to honest debate. The tobacco conspiracy wasn't just a story about cigarettes. It was a case study in how powerful corporations can use legal strategies to privatize profits while socializing harm, enriching shareholders while devastating public health, and escaping accountability for decades even when their culpability is clear and their victims number in the millions.